Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy and welcome to Retro Reviews. Now, this is going to be the last retro reviews that we do for a while, but we are going out on a high. So we are, of course, as you can see below, reviewing the 1993 romantic crime film directed by Tony Scott and written by Quentin Tarantino. That is True Romance. This has been a film that I have been trying to get George to watch for a very long time, and that's why we enjoy doing this series, because, we get to recommend films to each other. But we are going on a slight hiatus with this series for a number of reasons. Number one, Oscar season is like a month away as of now. And we have so many films that we need to review on the channel and find time to watch them. We love doing this series. We love going back to old films, but we are going to have to allocate that time to watch a lot of other things. And also, if you guys stick around till the end of this review, we are going to tease what we do have coming up, because something will be taking the place of retro reviews when the time is right. So we have teased it a couple of weeks ago on various videos, but we'll announce that at the very end of this one. But this is going to be a really fun film to talk about. This is one of my favorite films from the 90s. We're still kind of sticking with the 90s. We decided to keep that trend going over the last couple of weeks. And yeah, we're going to be talking all things True Romance. But before we get into it, just over to George with the socials.
Absolutely, guys. We want you to comment along with this site. It feels so strange being live on the channel. I can't remember the last time we did a live review. It's really strange.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Just getting used to it. A lot of other things happening, which is why. But comment on your thoughts. We'll obviously bring your comments up on the screen. And of course, if you do enjoy this video, hit that like button. If you like these older reviews, hit subscribe, because they're not done yet. As Chris said, end of April, we'll announce what's coming right at the end of this video. If you aren't already aware, it might be a little bit easier to put together than you think. However, as I said, there are so many videos coming away. Oscar films, Marvel TV shows, new releases. Yes, there's been a lot of calendar changes today. However, new releases are coming thick and fast. We've got a Meritarian review coming out on Thursday. And I'm going to say we should have a Godzilla versus King Kong review out this weekend. We're going to leave that as a kind of awkward sort of word there, because should is the key one for that. So, a lot of stuff coming up, and it's so nice to get new releases. Granted, we can't see them at cinema. That being said, if you want to find out when those videos will pop up, we always say go hit us on our socials. We've got Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at cinema_savvy, letterboxd.com/Cinema Savvy, and of course, we have a link to TeePublic in the description below. And as well in the TeePublic description note, in our YouTube video description, we of course have the competition to win a £15 Rakuten voucher. That's for the Oscar predictions. Details are in the description, so do check that out. And what you'll be able to do with that is, if you win, you'll be able to rent yourself some nice new films, because they're all online for the next couple of months. So do that. However, we are here to talk True Romance. Chris, as you said, this is a film you've been getting me to watch for a long time. And I'm going to jump in straight away. It felt, when we did that amazing Tarantino retrospective for Once More Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, I was rewatching loads of his films, having a really good time. And then the last two I'd never seen, which was Jackie Brown and Death Proof. Death Proof. Sorry, I always forget him. And I didn't like either of those. It was a real downer to finish that rewatch. And watching this was amazing, because it felt like I was watching a Tarantino film today. Obviously, I know he wrote it. I know he's attached to it, but this feels so much more than that. It literally feels like a Tarantino film, and it was so much fun to watch.
Yeah, my mind immediately went back to the retrospective we did as well. And I think we probably briefly mentioned this. Well, I know I probably did. I was like, and in between there was also a film that came out in between Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction that Tarantino written. True Romance, really good film. And then we probably moved on to the Pulp Fiction review. But yeah, this film is just tremendous to me, and it's such a beautiful blend. And it kind of sounds redundant saying it feels like both a Tony Scott film and a Quentin Tarantino film, because that's fundamentally what it is. And you can see the unique styles and tropes of both of those writer/directors combined into one beautiful package. And it really is interesting. Now, I am always curious to see what Tarantino would have done with this thing had he have directed it himself. There's a few sort of behind the scenes things here and there that you hear where in Tarantino's original script, he was going to have all the characters die, including the two main characters, Patricia Arquette and Christian Slater. And Tony Scott went with more of a sort of like happy ending, like more of a Hollywood ending, I guess, but it feels right for him. So it's these beautiful styles, and I would never have thought that Tony Scott would be the director to take on a Tarantino script. But it's so great. And we'll get into some of the tropes as well as we go through into the review. But I want to talk about the first time that we saw these films. Now, I can't remember how many years ago we did this, but I remember doing a countdown of our top 5 favorite cinematic experiences. It might have been last year, actually, during lockdown, I think, when we were reminiscing about going to the cinema. And this was probably in my top 5. And I spent the best part of, I don't know, maybe half hour trying to find which cinema that I saw this at London, because it was a beautiful cinema and I'd love to go there again at some point. If cinemas ever open again, which hopefully they will in a few weeks' time. And I found it. This was at the Picture House Central in Chinatown, London, apparently. I went to see this film. Now, I was seeing someone at the time and we wanted to go to the cinema, and it was just like a cold viewing. I'd never heard of True Romance. I didn't know what it was about, didn't know who it was directed by, written by, didn't know anything. So, you know, we sat down in this picture house and it was great. It was this beautiful old style cinema. I've never been to a cinema like it before, where you've got like the main lobby, and I don't know if it was like a repurposed building, but it looks like outside those classic like Inglourious Bastard style cinemas outside. Beautiful cinema. Like the red curtains over the screen and the red seats and everything. And it's the first time that this has ever happened too, like where an attendant came out and said, you're about to watch, obviously, True Romance. And they kind of told you a little bit about the film, a bit about how it was made and the pre-production. And it was great. It was this like surreal experience that I've never had before. And then obviously the film started, and thankfully the film was great. But then when I saw directed by Tony Scott, who was one of my favorite directors, you know, director of Top Gun and everything that I loved. And then when I saw written by Tarantino, I lost my mind. And I keep saying this to you as well, it feels like a hidden gem by Tarantino, like especially if you're late to the party watching it, which I know I was, and I know that you are as well, because this was probably like the big Tarantino thing that you haven't seen until today. And it was such a breath of fresh air. It was like, where has this film been my whole life?
Yeah, I'm going to bring in a comment by Lucas. He mentioned you can't be reviewing the film. Never thought someone would review this classic. Seems to have been buried. That's a very good point. I'm going to bring up something very quickly. You mentioned Picture House Central. Didn't realize it was that cinema. That is one of the best cinemas in the country for me. Shows art house films, new films, older films. You have a Cineworld, because it is going to reopen, guys. May the 17th. Cineworld is on the news today. Cineworld own Picture House, so anyone that has a Cineworld card, you can get discounts at all the picture houses up and down the country. I think it's like £2. I saw The Dead Don't Die there, the Adam Driver one with Bill Murray. That was good fun, and it's a lovely little cinema. It's tucked away, like where it's pure central London tourist area. You turn a corner, and it's just there. It's hidden away, and it's so nice. So, if anyone's near London, go to that cinema. It's nice, and cinemas are opening up soon. So, we might not get back with on May the 17th, but I believe there will be other films out. That aside, I'm going to bring up another true film from the 90s, because I don't know if we've had this. I think we had this conversation recently. I always get this mixed up with True Lies, because I have seen that one. Yes, it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger one, but I think it came out. Is it 94 that came out, and this is 93? And
let me just double check.
Whenever someone's like, "Oh, there's this classic film from the 90s, like True Lies or True Lies," I always thought it was the Arnold Schwarzenegger one. It's like
94,
yeah, 94. And it's an easy mistake. I know it's stupid that yes, there's a difference between romance and lies, but that's sort of maybe our generation that are a bit younger might not realize that they're two completely different things. So yeah, I think it goes under the radar, and as well, I think it's because it's the Tarantino film that wasn't directed by Tarantino, and it's not saying it's disrespectful to Tony Scott, but it's Tarantino film, not directed by Quentin Tarantino. And I think the other one, is it From Dusk Till Dawn? Was that the other one he wrote? Or was that...
He directed half of that. So Tarantino directed the first half, and then Robert Rodriguez directed the crazy ending half, which it feels like two movies mashed into one with that film.
And that's the thing, they don't get put in his elitist, the 10 films of Tarantino. Well, 9 apparently. I can't kill, but there's 2. And I think that's why it does go into the radar, because it has everything you'd expect except his name being on the director credits. And I'd say it is, Jim. I can imagine. I think at the time this didn't do well box office wise. However, this is a massive cult film. And jumping off the main characters really quickly, I'm sorry, but the first thing I clocked was a name came up in the credits, and it was Gary Oldman. And I was there like, oh my word. I messaged you straight. I was like, is this the Rastafarian Gary Oldman film I have seen so many photos and like, I say clips is a plural. He's in 2 scenes, but that I think everyone's seen the shot of him on the table just talking, and it would have been in list videos. It would have been in Gary Oldman like montages and stuff. And I was like, oh my god, I'm so excited for the Gary Oldman Rastafarian film. Didn't think it'd be 2 scenes and done, but you know, when you're heading into it, and even as an intro point for me that's not seen it, knows nothing about it, I was like, well, it's Patricia Arquette and it's also Ethan Hawke. And then I found out it's not Ethan Hawke at all. It just looks like Ethan Hawke.
Yeah.
But then you get like Sam Jackson pop up in the opening credits. You get Brad Pitt pop up in the opening credits. Christopher Walken pop and all these names. And you kind of give me a plot heads up, like, there's a lot of Tarantino people in here. And I was there like, fucking hell. And this was before they were in Tarantino films, except maybe one of them. And that's what made it so amazing. It was kind of, as you said, it is an outright hidden gem. I don't think many people probably even seen this, let alone heard of this in truth.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you do get all those cast members as well, and obviously would have been working with him. I'd love to know how present Quentin Tarantino was on the set of this thing, because it feels like, you know, the script was given to Tony Scott and then Tarantino didn't see it until it was all done. So I don't know if he was really present there, but no, it is awesome to see all these people that did eventually crop up in like another Tarantino film, some directly afterwards. You know, we're going to talk about that Christopher Walken scene, because that's easily my favorite scene in the entire film, but the very next film, Pulp Fiction. And I think around this time as well, 93, Samuel Jackson still wasn't a big name. You know, he was random guy in Jurassic Park. He wasn't the household name. And I want to say that it was probably Pulp Fiction that really sort of made him that star that he is. So, I mean, he only gets one scene in this. He gets a couple of lines, but what I love about this film is that you have all this this tremendous cast, and some of the actors might only be on screen for like a 5 to 10 minute scene. Some might get a couple of lines. They're not in the film for a whole huge amount of time, but their impact that they have, and I think that's just testament to the writing by Tarantino, who is so great. And even in his own films and his filmography, there might be these bit characters or supporting characters, but they have so much personality and they're memorable from like mentioning only one thing. And it's not just the cast as well. Like there's a bunch of sort of story structure and like thematic moments. I guess, spoiler alert for True Romance, the ending ends in like a big mass shoot 'em up where everyone dies, like a Shakespearean tragedy kind of thing. Very Reservoir Dogs, which you mentioned before we went live. And there's even like little lines here and there. And I'm going to quote one now. This was actually one of Gary Oldman's lines. And this is a line that's used by in Reservoir Dogs. You know, when it flashes back and Tim Roth's, it's showing him like creating that story before he went undercover.
Yeah.
And he's talking to that police officer. It's a line where it says, "We got everything from a diddle-eyed Joe to a damned if I know." That's a line from Reservoir Dogs, which is used again here. So I think this was one of Tarantino's earliest scripts. So I don't know if he had this script sort of written and done before he made Reservoir Dogs, or if it came sometime afterwards and he sort of like unearthed it. But it's quite fascinating to see all these links. And that's what makes it feel so much like a Tarantino film, despite the fact that it isn't directed by him.
Yeah, and I think it's those moments. I was reading that, I mean, the main character from the opening scene, you can tell it's like a sort of Tarantino kind of autobiography, that here's this guy that, I'm not saying he looks like Tarantino, but he kind of has those sort of Tarantino kind of face-like structure, that weird guy at the bar who tries to take a date to the cinema for a Kung Fu film, and it's not one Kung Fu film, it's 3 Kung Fu films. And Tarantino spoke in so many amazing interviews. I think if anyone didn't hear it, the Empire podcast with Edgar Wright this year was amazing. He's obviously got that. He's not just a filmmaker, he is a fan foremost than all of that. And you can tell that he's written that character based off probably his failures in relationships. I'm saying he's ever done a drug raid and some stuff like that, but
maybe it would explain a lot.
Wouldn't surprise me, yeah. And you can tell, and I think that he did a short film in the late 80s, which was about a birthday for somebody, and took elements of that and put it into this. So I can see where a lot of it comes from, and it is feel very Reservoir Dogs in this. So I'd be curious to know what time the scripts finished for both, because he might have sold this script 3 years before this came out, maybe, which might have been before he even went out to shoot Reservoir Dogs. So I'd be very intrigued to see that sort of history there. But it was so good, and it's that writing again where it feels like people having normal conversations. And yes, it's elongated. Yes, it can be ridiculous, but no one else can write normal conversations that human beings have with one another except Tarantino. He manages to create characters, and with those characters, he's creating normal conversations. And it sounds so easy, but not many films can do it, where you can have something irrelevant to the plot and it's a talking point for 4 or 5 minutes. I think that's where Tarantino's always stood out compared to so many other writers. It's not exposition filled. It's none of that. But more amazingly, it's like a Tarantino. It's the good stuff you want. I mean, not the good isn't offensive good stuff, but it will drop the N word, and you're like, yeah, that's a Tarantino thing, all right. And you can still spot those, having an actor pop in for a scene, or someone just being a bit weird, and other things that you can spot those like mannerisms that you expect from him. And this still has it. And I think fair play to Tony Scott, because you hear of so many films where like a writer's sold it and they've completely revamped it. I know it's a bit of an unfair comparison, but take Interstellar. The Spielberg Interstellar was going to be so different to Nolan's one, and Nolan's original screenplay was completely 180. It kept some of it, but not much. Whereas with this, it feels like it's kept most of it and changed a little bit.
Yeah, and Tarantino said, you mentioned like it being autobiographical. I don't know when this was quoted, but Tarantino has said in the past that out of all the films that he's made or been a part of, this is his most autobiographical one. And you get that as well. Like there's the comic book shop as well, and references and fondness for comic books. You have elements in Reservoir Dogs where there's a Silver Surfer poster in the background, and reference to The Thing from the Fantastic Four. In Kill Bill 2, there's a whole monologue by Bill, David Carradine, where he talks about comic book superheroes. So you can tell that's definitely a part of him as well. And I would be worried if I was Tarantino. He's put so much of himself into this character and this sort of world he's created with this, and passing it off to another director who, I mean, fantastic director as he is. Like I always say, to me, Tony Scott's one of the most what's the word I'm looking for? Underrated. Sorry,
underrated.
Jesus Christ, I'm tired. Underrated directors of all time. Like I love Tony Scott, and kind of overshadowed by his brother in a lot of ways with Ridley Scott, but I think equally in their own way, they're both brilliant. I could imagine, Tarantino might thinking like, is this going to be in safe hands? Is he going to be able to translate everything that I've put into this script in the unique way that Tarantino writes it with, as you mentioned, like the dialogue and everything that is so classic to Tarantino? You'd think he want ownership over that. But Tony Scott also manages to inject like his own style into it as well. I always talk about this. It's like the two directors that always do this. There's Tony Scott and there's Michael Bay. Filming stuff at like sunset, that's just a thing that's always in all of those movies, and you get that at the very end of this film where it's like magic hour and this beautiful sunset or sunrise, whatever it happens to be. The sex scene in this film actually really made me laugh, how it's all done in silhouette and it's like this blue, like midnight blue backdrop kind of thing, like a sheet's been hung up in the background, exactly the way that it's filmed in Top Gun. It looks like they got Christian Slater. Yeah, I had to check there. I was going to say Ethan Hawke. See what I mean? Like they're too similar. Like it looks like they got Christian Slater off the set, Patricia Arquette, and then they got Tom Cruise in and just brought the other two in. It's identical. So, but I like that it's sort of this merge of the two, and you can so distinctly see both sides of this, and you would never think that they would mix, but they work really well. I am curious to see what Tarantino would have done with it. I know that there's rumors that he would have told it in like his classic non-linear style, which he does with a lot of his films, especially around that time as well with Pulp Fiction and leading into Pulp Fiction. But I think this is just like, I would never have thought this combination with these two talents would have worked, but it really does.
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of hits you harder, is how well it does work. And I'm not, and this sounds horrible, not that Tony Scott doesn't have his own personality, but as you said, he seems like a filmmaker. I've only seen a couple of his films. But Beverly Hills Cop 2 we did recently, Top Gun, this, and I think, did he do Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3? I can't remember.
Yes, he did, yeah.
And it's right, that it's always at sunset. I think he always does go for that sort of California, LA type thing, and shooting at dusk or in the morning. And you see those bits in it, and that's the stuff that feels not like a Tarantino, but he's not sort of massacred the screenplay. He's not done that stuff. And for his directing, the action's fine. When there is action, he's good at it, that you feel tension with it, you feel that. And we know that Tarantino can do that as well, but it doesn't, you could differentiate between the pair. And I think they went hand in hand with one another in a mindset that, sort of going for earlier, that it could be really easy for a director to come in and just stamp all over it. But he puts his creative decisions on the film, but it never feels like it's gone away from what they were trying to do. And I think that's why it's so unique, because it is that it's just nice to get something that's not been massacred by you. It's really hard to sort of talk about it, but I just think it's directed fine. But I do think that the crux of this is Tarantino's script. It's so hard to come up. You can come over this knowing it's a Tarantino film more than a not Ridley Scott, than a Tony Scott film.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think as well, like if we move on to sort of like the characters now, because there's so many characters, I don't think we'll be able to talk about them, all of them. But when we get onto favorite moments, I'm sure a lot of them will crop up here and there. But like fundamentally, this is, I mean, the clue's in the name, true romance. It is a romance. It is a love story between these two characters with Christian Slater and Patricia Arquette, and it's got to function in that regard. It's a very Bonnie and Clyde type style film, and I guess that's would have been like the original idea if both of them had died at the end. But I'm glad that they didn't go down that route. Although it does get very violent with some of the characters as well, which is really impactful and hard hitting and stylized as well, which again is like a Tony Scott and Tarantino thing, but it does work as a love story in a weird way. Now, the way that these two characters come together, there are moments where it does feel laughable, and you could say that it feels too quick. It's, I think there's even a line where it's almost like a self-referential line at the beginning where she says, I know I've only known you for a couple of hours, but I think I'm in love with you. And you laugh because it's ridiculous, but the way that it's written and the way that they play it, like this feels like a genuine relationship. Like these are in it together. They're not going to rat each other out. There's the James Gandolfini scene, which is just really, really impactful. It's probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire film. And he's just like beating the hell into this woman, and she's not giving away any information at all. And it's just that loyalty between the two of them. It's a really nice, new romance that they go into. So it works in that regard. And then obviously that's at the backdrop as well of like a classic Tarantino style thing where it's about drugs and gangs and, chasing narcotics down. But the film had to work on that romance and that love angle for me to fundamentally succeed because they're your two lead characters. And I think it does that. I think the two have really great chemistry in there, the way that they're written. And although it's very quick, I think in the hands of any other director, any other writer, you wouldn't buy that, but you really well, I did anyway when I saw these two together in this film.
Yeah, a sort of backhand compliment I had when I saw this was when you get the scene of her saying, I was hired to be with you for the night. It wasn't ever 11. I was like, whoa, like this is the stuff you get in the last 20 minutes of the film, not the first like 10 minutes. And then it kind of worked. It was nice to get something like that was different. If it had been this horrible, boring, big story twist, wouldn't have worked. The fact it was out the way 5 minutes in, and that's what spurs their relationship on. I really liked that, and it made it stand out from other films that have done something similar, especially those, I've got a secret to hide from me for a big plot twist. It never felt like it went there, that they wanted to get that out of the way early just to explain that they were just politely put, not just a Bonnie and Clyde, but they're like a dumb Bonnie and Clyde. I know that sounds really stupid, that you like them because they're kind of harmless, although they've killed people, that he just wants to kill her pimp because it was her pimp and her stuff's there, and very Tarantino. I think that sort of stuff comes into it, and it's just you're there with it. It might not work for some people, and then those people will switch off inside 5 minutes because they'll be like, I can't get into this, and that'd be absolutely fine. But I think by doing it something different in a way we've not seen before, to me, just put it levels above other films, that especially romance films. Romance films are so not rare, but there are so many romance films where you can see straight through them straight away, and you know how it's going to go and how it's going to end, or what moment something's going to happen. This just evolved itself away from that and just did something else much better.
And it's a fun angle they bring to Christian Slater as well, because from the intro, like he's going on this like massive spiel about Elvis Presley, because he absolutely idolizes Elvis Presley and sort of the spirit and everything that Elvis Presley stood for when he was in his prime. And he says, back then he was like proper rockabilly, like taking no names and just like this icon, no fear kind of thing. And you can tell that he aspires to be like that, even down to the fact that he sees a weird ghostly vision of Elvis Presley, who's played by Val Kilmer in the film. He's not credited as Elvis Presley. He's credited as mentor, but obviously it's Elvis Presley. It's a really weird angle to go with, where he sort of has this like internal monologue almost with himself, or with like a person who's represented by Elvis Presley, whether he's sort of talking to himself and his conscious, if you want to call it that, is in the spirit of Elvis Presley. And then by the end of the film, he has become everything that he wanted to be. He is this badass that's done, been thrown into this situation and he's made it out, and he's got the cool eye patch at the end, and he's taken no names and everything. He's got out of the situation. So he's an interesting protagonist in that he's kind of like an everyman, you know, he's just working like minimum wage at a comic book store, going to see kung fu movies, wishing he could be like the people on screen that he sees. And then by the end of it, he's, you know, lived this sort of like rock and roll lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think that's why you quite like him, because by picking someone like Elvis as a mentor, it's quite harmless, it's quite funny. I don't know if it's meant to be done as comedy, but when you've got, you know, Val Kilmer, and you can tell it's him by his voice, but the fact they won't show his face in the shot, I know at the end you get a sort of a blur in the background, but you kind of, they're like, yeah, like it's just his head, and it shows he's a bit of a loser, but he's a nice loser that you don't dislike him too much. And it's ridiculous. It's the ghost of Elvis. Well, you know, it's Elvis's mindset telling him what to do, and I think that's why it works. That again could go wrong, but the way they handle it, I think, does work well. And I think because they've built this guy up as a, you know, he's gone to the cinema for a triple bill on his birthday by himself. He does it every year. The way they build him up, having a moment where like Elvis is his sort of mentor, doesn't have any issue, because it's like, yeah, I could see why he'd be like that.
Yeah, and what were the names of the films? I'm trying to remember. There's Sister, is it Street Fighter or something? Sister Street Fighter or something like that.
Something Street Fight, isn't it? Yeah. It's like 1, 2, and 3. It's like a trilogy they're showing, I think.
And they've got to be real films, right? Because it shows the clip on screen of the first film that he's watching. So again, that's just like adding to the list of films that Tarantino mentions in his films that I'm going to have to get around to at some point. I think Shogun Assassin is still number 1 on my list from Kill Bill 2 that he mentions. That's really piqued my interest. But there's so many characters to talk about in this thing. What do we talk about? Should we talk about Dennis Hopper and Christopher Walken? Should we talk about those next? Yeah. Or
let's go Christopher Walken. Let's get him out of the way. You messaged me saying there is a scene, and the moment Christopher Walken appears, like, okay, something's going to happen now, because Chris doesn't normally give me a heads up with no description. Mm-hmm. And that was like the Inglourious Bastards sort of bleeping 20 minutes. That is like, it's just a one-on-one in dialogue, and that was unbelievable for an outcome we probably knew was happening the moment someone stepped foot in the room. That was unbelievably tense, funny, and incredible. And that is just Tarantino writing. You can tell they are two actors that probably really enjoyed what they were talking about, because it's so specific, it's so random, it's so different. And I just thought that it was just, you know, we speak a lot on these, not just these videos, a lot on the channel, that you can tell when two actors are enjoying just acting with one another. Mm. And that's what this scene is. It's just the two of them. It's a dialogue face-off with only one outcome, but it's just so well done.
Yeah, I mean, it's the two actors as well, the talent like that they have as well. Like Dennis Hopper, fantastic actor. Blue Velvet's probably like the main thing that I've seen him in, where he's just terrifying in that film. Very weird film, but he's great in it. And I mean, Christopher Walken, especially like around this, like in his prime as well, like going back to the stuff that he did in like the 70s and the 80s especially, and then would be used obviously again for the watch joke in Pulp Fiction, the film that Tarantino made after this. And you get that impression as well that Tarantino has a huge love for like Christopher Walken's work as well, like especially at the end when you have the scene where they go to the movie director and he's making like this Vietnam film, and Christian Slater's character is kind of going on this really passionate spiel about all these war films that he's loved. And I think he even mentions Deer Hunter, which I think Christopher Walken won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor that year. So you can tell that he's, you know, probably always wanted to work with him, and he's finally got him on board for one scene. And this one scene in the film, I know we're kind of jumping ahead to favorite moments, but this is easily my favorite moment. I can go back and rewatch this scene in isolation any day of the week. And I remember seeing this film for the first time when I went to the cinema, and I was really enjoying the film, and I knew that I loved the film. But when it hit this scene, this felt like the most Tarantino scene in the entire film, sort of truncated into this like 10-minute monologue. And it's that like slow burn. It's that casual conversation that comes up. And I was actually reading about the idea and how Tarantino got the idea for this. And apparently he just heard more or less this entire conversation happen. He was living with a black guy at the time, and there was an Italian there, and they were having this argument with each other. And apparently he just sort of clocked it, like kept it away in his mind some time. And then he wrote the script for this film. And I can imagine that. I can imagine that he'd probably have these, you know, quirky characters that he's probably met throughout his life where he gets ideas from. And it's just tremendous. It's that slow burn. It's the music, that sort of like opera, classical music that kicks in. But it's also got that tension to it as well. And I think that when it gets to that moment where Dennis Hopper says, "Can I have one of those Chesterfields now, one of those cigarettes?" From that moment on, he knew he was going to die. He knew that he was going to get killed by this guy. And he was, I think he was probably looking for a quick death. That's why he insulted them as much as he did. Another reference as well, Chesterfields, the cigarettes. That's what Steve Buscemi and, oh God, the name of like Mr. White in that film. Winston Wolfe, I forgot the name of the actor, Harvey Keitel. They're the cigarettes that they have in that film as well. So maybe a coincidence, it's a popular brand of cigarettes, I suppose, at the time, but that was cool. It's a tremendous scene. It was the first time that I saw that scene, I was in stitches. It was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, the one thing that made me laugh is that I just couldn't see Christopher Walken as an Italian, especially a Sicilian, and I don't know if that was a part of it that made it funny, but when he took that cut off and you see that scarf, I was like, "Whoa, this is a Don here," and I thought he was wonderful with every bit. And the big thing is we only get him in one scene. I kind of said that to you earlier. It was like I thought I was expecting him to pop up in the final scene or something, or the fact we just get him for one scene works so much better than it could have, because he is this threat that popped up for a scene that's ultimately got no payoff. That he doesn't realize his dad's been killed later on in the film. That it's a scene that didn't need to exist, but it does, and it's the best scene in the film by a country mile. And I think Tarantino's good at that. He writes scenes that shouldn't work, scenes that shouldn't happen, but they do, and you're attached to it because of how well it is written. And I think the whole thing was just played off so well. And it's the fact that he knows he's going to die as well from from having the cigarette. The fact they let him have it as well. They know that they're just kind of playing with him at this point. And the fact you have James Gandolfini just in the background, I was like, is that James Gandolfini? Like, is he going to crop up later on in the film? Of course he did. But it was just amazing. Yeah, you can see why Tarantino wanted him for the scene in Pulp Fiction. I can imagine for people that probably saw this at the time that would go on to watch Pulp Fiction, that was probably amazing for them, getting that contrast of seeing something similar. But and I'm glad that we didn't get too many of the Christopher Walken sort of, if he popped up into a Tarantino film every year, just a speech would be a bit, we've said in the same times, but the fact you get it twice is so well done.
Yeah, he's just got such a great way of talking as well, and the script. Like, I think his opening line in the film, I think Dennis Hopper says, like, "Who are you?" He's like, "The Antichrist." You got me in a vendetta kind of mood. It's just classic Tarantino dialogue. He's brilliant in it. And there was a line, and I don't know if this was a reference to something, because I did check this up, and he didn't do any film this year, but when he shoots Dennis Hopper, he says, "I haven't killed a man since 1984." And I thought, wouldn't that just be like Tarantino to reference a film that Christopher Walken made? Now, I did check. He did a film called The Dead Zone in 1983, and then he was in A View to a Kill in 1985. So, and I know he plays the villain in that film, doesn't he? I think Christopher Walken. I haven't seen A View to a Kill yet. More to come later. We'll tease that at the very end. So I don't know if it's in reference to that, but it came out in 85. But I don't know if it meant that it was filming in 84. Maybe it's not related to anything, but I just thought if anyone's going to reference some kind of movie or do like an in-joke like that, it would be Tarantino. So I'm not sure about that. But I guess we can talk about James Gandolfini, because you mentioned that. That's, again, another one of my favorite moments in the film. He is terrifying in this film. Really imposing and just really genuinely insane. And the moments where he says, the first time you kill someone, it's like affects you the worst. The second time, and he goes on like this huge monologue, but he's really like this physically imposing force, beats the hell out into a character as well. And it is really graphic, and you feel the impact of every punch. It's uncomfortable to watch. The way it's edited, though, it's quite, I'm not going to say it's funny, but it offsets it with Christian Slater's off. He's getting food, I think, isn't he, at the time? He's getting these burgers. And one of my favorite jokes, in someone's reading like a music magazine, and it's like an issue that's dedicated to Elvis. And then he says, like, "Oh, have you got to the section where there's like all these like Elvis, like insane people who are just like absolutely psychotic?" And the guy's just looking at him like, "Yeah, you're one of them, mate." But then it cuts back to her being beaten up. And I think in the hands of any other director, that would have come off as like really distasteful and wouldn't have worked. But it works for the structure of this film. And we both said this as well before we went live. I really need to see The Sopranos, because I still haven't seen The Sopranos, and he is tremendous in this. And I know that The Sopranos is meant to be like his, in terms of like an actor, that's the thing that he's remembered for the most. And I've heard he's tremendous in that. So seeing what he's like in this film in only about probably like 10 minutes of screen time, maybe a little bit more, I can't even imagine what he's like in a full 8 to 10 season TV show.
Yeah, and that's the thing. 'Cause I have not seen much from James Gandolfini at all. I think one of the only things I have seen him in is, oh god, the film with, oh my god, I've even forgotten it. In the Loop. Sorry, it's the thick of it American film, and everyone speaks about The Sopranos, and it's on those lists. And I think it was like HBO's first big hit. It has set the standards of TV that came from down the years, and everyone says, you have to watch this. It is incredible, and I've just never had that. Oh, it's another gangster film. It's another this type of stuff, and it's another HBO crime series. And I watched this today, and I was like, oh, I should be watching The Sopranos now, because what scene was mental. It was as you said, it's so graphic. I don't get off-putting of watching films much, but that was one of those few times where the violence was uncomfortable. And it's kind of like he's scary because it looks real, and it's so darkly done compared to, I'm not going to criticize Tony Scott, but if that was Tarantino, it'd probably be very different. That fight scene, it'd probably be a bit more comical, a bit quicker, wouldn't be as drawn out, but it made him more terrifying as a supporting character. And the fact, even before that, we get him when he's got the shotgun of Brad Pitt, and he's kind of like, is he going to kill Brad Pitt? Even though Brad Pitt's told him where they're going to be, and you kind of not like him, but you like the fact he kept Brad Pitt, but he is scary in this. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is maybe the film that got him the job on Sopranos. Did he need an audition? Just show him that scene from this, and it probably was job done.
Yeah, absolutely. When did The Sopranos come out? Was it 2000s? Was it early?
I think it was the late 90s.
Oh, was it? Oh, Jesus Christ! I didn't realize it was that. I say old. I was born in the 90s. I'm making myself feel old. Christ alive! It is on the list of TV shows to watch, but it's a lot of seasons. It's a lot of time. I'll get round to it at some point. But my God, there are so many other great characters in this. We talked about Gary Oldman, just absolutely disappears into that role. We were talking earlier as well. You said like 90s Gary Oldman. He was tremendous. Dracula, Fifth Element, Leon. All these really colorful, usually villains, actually, like these really colorful, weird villains he's just so versatile an actor. Like you'll see him in as Winston Churchill in The Darkest Hour. You go back and watch him in this, completely different. You wouldn't even know it's him. But two of my other favorite characters as well I wanted to bring up. So we reviewed the Beverly Hills Cop trilogy not too long ago. And you have the character of Serge in those films, who's played by Bronson Pinchot, who's in this as well. He is hilarious in this film. He's this really weaselly, snidey little sort of like go-between guy. Gets one of my favorite lines in the film, and it almost feels like an improv line, but it probably wasn't. It's where he's on the phone to the director, who's played by Saul Rubinek. And he says like, I can't remember what he says, but he mishears him over the phone. And he says, like, you want me to suck his dick? And he's like, no, let me talk to dick. He's like, oh, okay, and passes the phone over. The bit with the cocaine as well, that's just hysterical to me every single time. It's all these side characters again. You've got the cops as well who are listening in, who, wire him up, and it cuts to them as well. It's just everyone gets something to do. But I loved seeing Bronson Pinchot. He's one of my favorite characters in this film.
I didn't know who he was until you told me after. I was like, when you watch him, I was like, I remember him like he's familiar. I don't know what he's from. And then it's like, or is it just that sort of early 90s sort of wannabe actor, drug party boy on the side type thing, not a stereotype? And you kind of point out, the moment you point out, it said it all. And he was great in it. I think he was a good addition. The whole little sub story, and again, Tarantino, that, just the stupid main character's got a stupid mate who wants to be an actor, who's clearly terrible at acting, which is what makes the whole thing even funny. And someone he knows from acting class just happens to, be a drug kingpin. Well, not a kingpin, but obviously be friends with a producer that does distribute all the drugs. And it was that sort of, it reminded me of that sort of Jackie Brown types of Tarantino, that it's just someone else is someone else, and they're all connected somehow. And I thought it was so funny. With those two, I always forget his name. The guy that played the friend. He's in so many things.
Oh God, I just had the name.
It's going to annoy me now.
Michael Rappaport, is it?
That's the one. Michael Rappaport. He's been in loads of stuff. He's been in a sitcom watched when I was younger. I think it was Family at War or something. But he's been in loads of stuff, and I was like, oh my God, it's him, and he hasn't aged in like 20 plus years, and it was just, it's that. And I hate using the word world building, but it's that ensemble cast, isn't it? Of like every character on screen, you actually know there's a character there. it's not just somebody there because they need to be there as a character that we know Tarantino has probably written a life story of, or he probably knows people. If this is that autobiographical thing, he probably knows people that went off to try and be actors and things like that, and it feels so not real, but Tarantino-esque.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Another thing that I wanted to bring up as well is the music in this thing. Because you are the biggest Hans Zimmer fan that I know, and Hans Zimmer does the music to this film now. It feels like there's maybe two or three themes in this entire film, so it must have been a very easy job, relatively, for Hans Zimmer for this film. It always reminds me of Lion King. Just, I don't know if it's sort of like the instrument, even like the final shot of the film is this sort of like Lion King sunset / sunrise, and it always reminds me of Lion King when I hear the music. I don't know why, because it's not particularly, it's on a xylophone, isn't it? It's not necessarily like African instrumentation, but it should be a theme that doesn't really fit the film. Like on paper, like I'd hear that song, I wouldn't think it would go to a film like this. And I think I remember sitting down for this film and hearing that music because it immediately kickstarts the film, and I'd heard that music before. I don't know whether I'd heard it in some kind of, well, I wouldn't have heard it in a concert at that point, I don't think, because I don't think I saw Hans Zimmer at that point. But whether it was like, I think it was on a television advert, actually, in the UK. It was on something. I remember hearing that theme. And then when I saw this film, I was like, oh, so that's where that music's from. And then I put two and two together. But it weirdly works in the film. It's this really nice, uplifting film, and it fits. It has like a nice sort of feel to it with the film, which you wouldn't immediately think that those two things would go together. But, fair play to Hans Zimmer. It works for the film.
Yeah, I don't know if you would have seen it by then. When did we see him? 2016. Was that Birmingham? I've heard this.
May have done then. I may have heard it before then. Perhaps.
I remember, if anyone's not been to a Zimmer concert, not to brag, we both have. He always stops before some of the songs he's about to play, and he'll give like a speech about the impact of that in his career or behind the scenes. And he always speaks. In a couple of times, he always speaks before the True Romance suite. And he always talks about him and Tony's got how Tony's got approached him for this film and how he was so excited for it. And I think I know he did Driving Miss Daisy and Rain Man. Mm-hmm. I think this is one of the ones where he's has really elevated something to the next level. So I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen him live, for obvious reasons. But the moment the song starts, is like it's straight away the film starts. It's like, oh, it's True Romance, of course. It's the Hans Zimmer soundtrack, and we spoke so much about Tarantino. This is definitely a Tony Scott thing. Yeah. This is definitely there is the odd normal song played in the film, but that's when you get the big shift change from a Tarantino film is having a score. And yeah, you are right. It's two or three themes, but it's just that Hans Zimmer stuff, isn't it? That it's a random, quirky theme for a very random pair of people, and I think that's why it works. Is that not getting deep and saying that the music reflects the characters and all that nonsense, but it is very much, he didn't go fully intense. He didn't sort of get the violins out and all that normal stuff like Inception. This was just very much an upbeat soundtrack, and I think it did the job for them because you're paying attention to what's happening on the screen. It's just something going on the side, but it was very weird hearing it in a film for the first time because I'm used to obviously seeing it like on his concerts on Blu-ray or in person. It was very strange. Music's not really my forte, but soundtracks isn't. It was nice. I guess I could take that off the Hans Zimmer list. Mm-hmm. There's many other films I need to see, but of those big ones, it's probably one of the last few.
I was going to say, and another one of his big ones, and I don't know, I guess we can say, because I know we're putting a hiatus on it, our next one was going to be Crimson Tide, and we might even come back to Crimson Tide. That is actually also a Tony Scott film. I don't know if we predicted that, and that's what we'll be moving on to next. And of course, Hans Zimmer did the music to that, which is probably your more grandiose score that you would expect from a Hans Zimmer when you think of it. But again, it just goes to show how versatile Hans Zimmer is. He knows when to rein it back and keep it simple when it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. But you still get themes in there as well. You have like the main one. I actually think it's played on a marimba, not a xylophone. I think a xylophone is like a tinkly metal one. I think marimba's like the wooden one. But you have those moments where, the James Gandolfini, Patricia Arquette scene where it does have a more somber tone to it and more tension to it. So it's just Hans Zimmer doing what he does best. It's fantastic. So I think we've probably talked about everything we can with this film. We don't want to make it too long, so I guess we can go into overall thoughts. I adore this film. I think maybe I like this film even more based on that first time viewing, because I've never really had that with a film where I'll just sit down and knowing absolutely nothing. Usually I've seen a trailer for the film, or I've read up about it, or I know who's directing it, I know who's written it, I know who's in it. This was just absolutely nothing. This could have gone either way for me. And I had the time of my life watching this film for the first time. I'll never forget that. And every subsequent time that I've watched it, it still had the same impact on me. If you haven't seen this film and you're a Tarantino fan, go and watch it because it definitely feels like one, but it also feels distinctly like a Tony Scott film. It's this beautiful mash of director and writer, and both showcase their style into it. It doesn't feel like one's competing over the other. They both work tremendously well. Great acting, great cast of characters, fun characters, a really nice relatable. Well, I don't say relatable. I don't know how many people have ran off with a call girl and then found like a whole bag full of uncut cocaine. Maybe someone has out there. I don't know, but it's just a really nice story. Told, directed, written fantastically well. But I think the selling point for me is that Tarantino dialogue that's just, absolutely sizzles off the page. And this was old school Tarantino, you need to remember as well. This was, I don't know when it was written, but this fit right nicely in between Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. So I definitely recommend people checking this out. Or even if you have seen it and it's been a while, give it a rewatch because I think it's still very watchable. It's not on Netflix now, though. I checked earlier when I last saw this. I saw this about. I actually didn't see this all too long ago. Actually, this film. I think I saw it last year, probably around November kind of time. I think November, December, and it was on Netflix. So if you can get a hold of it somehow, or even just buy it, rent it, whatever, it's just great.
Yeah, I would recommend this. As someone that's new to it, this is probably one of the favourite newer films I've seen recently, and there's been a fair few. But it did feel that, wow, this was great. I'd have loved to have seen this at a cinema. So you can imagine being at the Prince Charles and like a marathon of loads of other, there's like 90s films and stuff. So I'd actually love to see this one day. If I can get it released at a cinema, that'd be great. That and Heat are on the list. But no, I thoroughly recommend this. If you're a Gary Oldman fan, Samuel L. Jackson fan, a fan of pretty much anyone from this, the likelihood is that you should tune in, check it out, because even Brad Pitt, he's got like 3 scenes and he's great in it, and it did make me think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had so much fun with this. Again, it's just a very well written and directed film, and it's enjoyable, and it's something a bit different. And that's the thing of these Tarantino films, is that you truly don't get films like them. And I couldn't tell you one that's exactly like this. There's nothing like this. And I don't think anyone can impersonate and try and make one like this. So massively recommend it. Absolutely amazing to watch. And I can't wait to see it again, because there's probably so much to unpack on a second viewing as well. And it's just amazing. Gary Oldman as a Rastafarian kingpin. Like, where do you go wrong after that? But just go and see it if you haven't already stuck around. Again, going off what Lucas mentioned earlier, it's not a film people speak about.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a shame. I didn't see why. I think very much the 90s falls in that category where not horrible things to the 80s. Chris, don't take this personally. People are so transfixed on the 80s. And I think because obviously we're now, even aside being in the 20s, fucking hell, even being in the 10s, that 90s era is forgotten about, I think, because it's next to the 80s. I think 70s get the same thing. People speak about the films from them, but not that as a decade-old film. I think that's the same in the 90s, and it falls into that radar, but this is mesmerizing. So definitely go and see it. That being said, as we've kind of politely said, this is the last retro reviews for a while. We've got a lot of Oscar films coming up. We've got a lot of other things coming up on the channel. We've got the Marvel Infinity, sorry. We've got the Infinity Saga retrospective happening. Age of Ultron was tomorrow. However, we mentioned that we're going to be teasing something, so we're going to bring up a thumbnail. So there's a really big film coming out this year. There are so many of these big films coming out this year, by the way. Another round of calendar delays tonight, but luckily nothing too major. One film that's probably been one of the biggest victims after Kingsman is, of course, been James Bond. No Time to Die is, of course, now coming out September 30th in the UK, and we've had this plan made since the new year when it was due out in April. We've had so much stuff, and we're going to finally drop it, and we're not going to get it wrong. Certainly, at least in the UK, vaccines are going well, so we'll definitely be seeing this one in September. But we're going to be starting a James Bond series at the end of April after the Oscars have finished. We're going to be doing one film a week as a review. I'm going to bring you all up a thumbnail here for Dr. No. As you can tell, there's a bit of a theme, and these have been in the pipeline for, we could probably say, well over a year or two, couldn't we?
Oh God, years. This is like going way back. I think when Skyfall came out, did we do a review on Skyfall? Was that when we?
That was 2012.
Oh God. Okay, no, it wasn't that. Spectre.
There we go.
But like the franchise of Bond films has like been a thing that I've never watched them all, so it's going to be a first time for me. I think I attempted this when we did Spectre. We were going to do a retrospective on all the Bond films, and then we realized how many Bond films there are, how much of a big ask that is. And even our ideas for this one, we were going to do 3 Bond films a week, which we realize is insane. So I think 1 a week is going to be this nice, it's going to be paced out well, and it is going to take us directly into that new one when it comes out, No Time to Die. So I will finally be able to cross all those Bond films off the list. And I mean, we're a glutton for punishment on this channel, aren't we? You've taken on 2 of the biggest franchises of films in cinematic history all in 1 year. Like, as if Marvel wasn't enough for you, here's 20 odd James Bond films as well.
Yeah, this is what I realized earlier tonight when I was on the calendar. It was Marvel finishes like a couple of days before the Oscars start, and this is going to start a couple of days after the Oscars. So I'm kind of trading in one franchise of 23 for one of 25. So yeah, it's this one's not 3 weeks because it's 1 a week. I think they're going to be every Tuesday, but the first week I believe we're going to have two films out because they pulled the calendar back a week, and we don't want this to start before the Oscars. We don't want to get franchises crossed over. So if you do like James Bond, it's going to be 1 a week. It's not a hard commitment. Watch them along with us, not in watch-alongs, but just in terms of I'm not going to chuck 3 at you a week for you to have seen them all, because that would be probably a lot harder for Bond than it is for Marvel. There'd be a lot of Roger Moore films to get through, but to somebody else, he's their favorite. And there's so many discussions to have on Bond. I'm excited. We've gone through many big franchises on this channel. There have been 3 big ones remaining, one of which we're halfway through on. The other one is starting in April, and there is another one which we'll speak about at the end of the year, if you haven't already guessed that by now. So do stick around. There's so much stuff coming up, but I'm very excited to watch James Bond films, and also the fact that I'm not committing myself to watch 3 of them a week, because that would be torture. I think last year, sorry, this is really off point. Last year, just before Corona happened, I think I finished the Connery ones, and I'd watched them all across like a week because we were preparing to do things, and yeah, it didn't work in the end for obvious reasons. However, we don't just talk about James Bond or Marvel on this channel, but we do have a Marvel series. So this Friday and every other Friday, join us for our not the Winter Soldier, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier spoiler discussions, 8 p.m. live. Episode 1 is now the most viewed Disney premiere of all time, so maybe episode 2 will get a bit more intrigue. If you do like that, do join us for that. They will be live streamed. We've done a lot of pre-recorded videos recently, as we also have the Infinity Saga retrospective. All of that is pre-recorded, so we don't get the live stream discussion, but we have a lot of new people coming on the channel for that. So Age of Ultron coming tomorrow. We're well into Phase 2. Phase 3 is just coming very soon. So if you do have some Marvel favorites, do check that out. The details are already on our channel, so have a look at that. And as we mentioned earlier, check out the Oscar predictions giveaway. That is in the description below. A lot of Oscar films coming up. First up is The Mauritanian Review, a film that was nominated for 0 Oscars. However, it got 5 BAFTA nominations, so there'll be a review out for this one this Thursday. Do check that out on the channel. And we just have loads more things, but we're here for True Romance, so just let us know your thoughts. It's been a great video. It's been nice to do it live, and I think one of the perfect films to finish these on temporarily, because it's been very fun to do them, but there are just so many films we're all committed to watching at the moment. Best thing to do at the moment is just put on hiatus. We've got new releases coming out, as we said. Also, Kong vs. Godzilla, and I've spoken far too much about new releases and everything we do on the channel. It's a bit of a chore at this point in time, so I'm going to round off with our socials. Hit us up on Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at cinema_savvy, and letterboxd.com/Cinema Savvy. All our films we do are logged on there. Posts are scheduled. Last-minute films scheduled. Who knows? Maybe a review could pop up on Friday morning and none of us know. We genuinely have no idea what happens half the time, so check that out. I've said everything I can say. I'm going to hand it over to Chris for the final farewell.
Yeah, I was going to say, so this has been a really fun series to do. We're not saying it's going away forever, but obviously the hiatus at the moment. We've got plenty of other stuff coming. This is always one that we can go back to. And this is the freedom of retro reviews. There are, inexhaustible amounts of films from any decade. We're not choosy. We can literally pick anything. And we will come back to this at some point. I guarantee that. But for the moment, this is a farewell. I want to say thank you to everyone that has been following retro reviews, and especially for tuning in tonight as well. And first and foremost, I'm glad that you enjoyed this film tonight, George, because this would have been a really awkward one to end on if you'd have hated this film. So it's been a great one. I won't say that all roads led to this one, but I have been wanting you to watch this film for a long time. So at least we can cross that off now, and that's done. But yeah, I want to say a big thank you to everyone watching tonight. We had a lot of True Romance fans in the comments today. And yeah, till the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Stay safe, everyone.